Okay, still don't have Bill's prayer bell, sorry. But welcome to Ordinary Life today. I'm excited to welcome Coach Michael Taylor to be our speaker today. Bill is still on a boat, and our summer speaker series still continues, but Bill did send me an email and asked me to give Michael a hug. And so I said, you don't really know me, I don't know you, but would you like a hug? And he took a hug. So already top marks for our speaker today. But I just want to give a quick intro, and then we'll turn it over to Michael. So Coach Michael Taylor is an author, speaker, filmmaker, and human potential architect, committed to helping people awaken to their extraordinary potential. After overcoming divorce, bankruptcy, depression, foreclosure, and homelessness, Michael transformed his greatest challenges into a life devoted to personal and spiritual transformation. Through his books, films, workshops, and speaking, he shares a message of hope, possibility, and the belief that even life's greatest breakdowns can become pathways to extraordinary breakthroughs. Michael's spoken to us several times before, and we're super happy to have him back. Thank you for being with us today in Ordinary Life, and turn it over to Coach Michael Taylor.
Good morning. So welcome to the Breakdown Breakthrough Principle. Now, a breakdown can be defined as an instance of serious difficulty or misfortune. So I'd like to see a show of hands of anyone here who has not experienced an instance of serious difficulty or misfortune. I don't see any hands. Why is that? Because breakdowns are woven into the fabric of life. As a human being, you will always, always, always experience breakdowns. So let's take a look at some of the breakdowns that we go through. How about loneliness? How about getting fired from a job? Especially one you didn't deserve to be fired from. How about illness? Betrayal? Ooh, that's a major breakdown. How about divorce? Anxiety? Depression? These are just a few of the breakdowns that we go through in life. So raise your hand if you've ever experienced any breakdown. Every hand should be up, right? So here's what I want you to know. Your breakdown doesn't disqualify you. It actually prepares you. So what exactly is a breakdown? I see a breakdown as a sacred knock. And a sacred knock is simply life's way of getting your attention to challenge you to grow. So here's the question. Are breakdowns good or are breakdowns bad? Well, Shakespeare once said, nothing is either good or bad until you think it's so. So, the breakdown breakthrough principle can be found throughout nature. One of the best metaphors for this is the metaphor of the caterpillar to the butterfly. So, if you think of yourself as the caterpillar, the first step you're going to go through is this thing called a breakdown. So, when you go through a breakdown, number one, it's generally not comfortable. There's a lot of uncertainty, and everything begins to change. But remember, this isn't the end. Then we move into the transformation stage. Now, did you know that when the caterpillar goes into this chrysalis stage, that it's actually a violent act? There's some things called imaginal cells where these cells begin eating itself up to prepare it for this transformation. Your life's the same way. When you go through this transformational process, it's probably not going to be comfortable. As a matter of fact, it's probably going to be very painful. But is it good or is it bad? Stay with me here. Now, once we go through this transformational process and this transformational period, then we become the butterflies we were born to be. But the key here is to recognize that everything you need to make that transformation is already inside of you right now. You simply have to be open to the possibility that the breakthrough is coming. So, I want to share a few stories of some people who turned their breakdowns into breakthroughs. Albert Einstein. Did you know that Albert Einstein didn't speak till he was approximately 4 years old? And some of his teachers actually labeled him as mentally challenged. And yet, look at how he changed the world with his brilliance. How about Oprah Winfrey? Billionaire, media mogul, we all know her story, but did you know that she was raped at 13? Gave birth to a child. The child died. She was fired from her job because she didn't have the right look. You know what that means, right? And yet, those breakdowns, I believe, actually prepared her for the breakthrough that she's now experiencing. And what about J.K. Rowling? Depressed mom, book rejected multiple times, depressed, and yet she wrote one of the most popular books ever with the Harry Potter series. And what about Tyler Perry? Media mogul, owns the largest movie studio in the world. But did you also know that he was sexually abused, homeless, abandoned? And yet look at how his story ended up. And then there's Steven Spielberg, one of my favorite directors. Did you know that when he was in film school, his professor literally told him he would not make it as a filmmaker? Okay? And then there's this guy. Talk about overcoming breakdown. Jesus literally overcame life's greatest breakdown, which is death. But Jesus told us that these things and even greater things you shall do also. I personally take that literally because I believe what he was pointing to was that we had access to his Father the same way that he did. So no matter what challenge we may be dealing with, if we connect to the source, we can overcome any breakdown. So I think there's a lot of lessons within his life story. And I think probably the most powerful lesson is the lesson of death and resurrection. I believe that literally a part of us has to die so that another part of us can be resurrected. That part that has to die could be called the ego. The part that is resurrected could be called the Christ self, the divine self, your higher self, whatever you choose to call it. But when we study the life of Jesus and follow his example, it's explaining to us how the breakthrough principle works. Because it's a universal law and principle. So let me share my breakdown story. So I was born in the inner city projects of Corpus Christi, Texas, to a single mom with 6 kids. And we were basically the poster children for poverty back in the 60s. And when I was in the 11th grade, I decided to drop out of high school because I convinced myself I could get rich selling vacuum cleaners. And it was a really poor choice because I never sold a single vacuum cleaner. So there I was, a young black male in America with only an 11th grade education. Chances of success? Slim to none. Fortunately, I landed this job with this building supply center. And I worked extremely hard. I climbed the corporate ladder pretty quickly. And I actually became the youngest manager in the history of this company at the age of 22. At the age of 23, I was living the American dream. I had the house, the wife, the 2.5 kids, the 401ks and vacations and all of that. And by society standards, I was successful. And within about a 6.5-year time frame, that American dream turned into the American nightmare. Divorce, bankruptcy, foreclosure, a deep state of depression where I even contemplated taking my own life. I was homeless for 2 years, living out of my car. So I consider myself to be a PhD in breakdown. And this isn't something that I read in a book. This is something that I experienced. Life taught me through these experiences. So I want to come back to the question, are breakdowns good or are breakdowns bad? Well, here's what I believe. I have come to believe that every breakdown actually brings us a lesson and a gift if we're willing to look deeply enough. The most important lesson I've learned through this process is that there is but one presence and one power in the universe: God, the good, omnipotent. Now, as a former atheist, I was brought up Baptist, and I always had a lot of questions that they would not answer when I was in a Baptist church. And so basically I was brought up to believe that there was this old white dude up in the clouds in heaven taking notes of my life, waiting for me to screw up so that he could banish me to this thing called hell. Well, through this transformational process, what I've learned is that there is this thing called what I call divine intelligence. Divine intelligence, I believe, is the energy and intelligence that created and is still creating this amazing universe that we live in. This intelligence knows exactly what it's doing. And another word for this intelligence could be love. Love is the source, the creative energy, the divine impulse that creates everything. And when I come to the understanding that this love can only do one thing, which is love me. It's not doing anything to me. It's doing everything through me. And so with that belief system, I don't believe there's this negative force, this negative energy, this devil that's causing things to happen to me. If I'm experiencing pain or discomfort or breakdown, it's simply because I've disconnected from the love. And it is my responsibility to reconnect to that love. And so if I have that understanding when I'm stuck in breakdown, I have to be able to tell myself that, what would love do now? Because I'm not being punished. Love is simply guiding me to the highest version of myself. And so this lesson, this is the lesson that literally changed my life. Because I stopped seeing God as something out there, something in here. And so that is the lesson that I learned that has changed everything. Because as I stand here today and I think about it, when I was an atheist, there was absolutely nothing you could have said that would have changed my mind to believe that there was something greater than me. I just thought I was just a really smart guy that could figure stuff out. I never pointed fingers and placed blame on God when I was going through all my stuff. But that awareness, that understanding, that knowingness that I am connected to this thing called love is what drives everything that I do. So here's a question. What if you are resisting most? What if the thing you are resisting most is actually preparing you for the life you truly want? Think about that for a moment. So when we go through breakdowns, here's what we usually do. First of all, we believe something's wrong with us. Okay? Another thing we'll do is we believe that life is just unfair. This is just happening to me and life is unfair. I don't deserve this. Some of us believe, well, God just abandoned us. And so when you're in the middle of breakdown and you feel like God has abandoned you, that's a pretty hopeless feeling. And then some of us believe that we're broken. A lot of us have those feelings. So what if there's a deeper truth? What if the hidden truth in the breakdown is that it is simply an invitation? It's not the end of your story, it's the beginning of your awakening. So because beneath every breakdown is an invitation to become who you were born to be. Have you ever read a book and came across a quote that stopped you in your tracks and you realized in that moment that that one quote was the reason you were supposed to read that book? Anybody ever have that experience? I read a book by Mary Manning Morrissey called Building Your Field of Dreams. And when I read that book, this quote jumped off the page, and it says, all the while you think you're building your dream, when in reality, your dream is building you. And when I read that, all of a sudden, something in me shifted. And at the time, I had been chasing this dream for several years with no success. And I was kind of feeling stuck. But I had begun my spiritual journey, so I had accepted the idea that God was guiding me, but I was just stuck. And when I read that, I went, ooh, wait a minute. When I began this journey, I was this people-pleasing, approval-seeking nice guy that was trying to get people to like me. But as a result of being on that journey, I had transformed myself to my authentic self. I was no longer hiding behind the mask of Mr. Nice Guy. I had let all that go. And so that dream of building this company had challenged me to chase money first, but in doing so, it challenged me to grow. And I'll never forget, I was sitting there reading this book, and then I had tears in my eyes because I got it. I went, okay, God, I get it. This dream has been building me all along. I'm not the same guy that started this dream some 3 or 4 years prior to that revelation. And so I want you to think about right now, maybe you're going through a breakdown and you're trying to figure out what to do next. My invitation is for you to think about this idea that this breakdown is your invitation for you to live your dream. So after reading that book, I came up with what I call the 5 stages of a breakthrough. And again, I've been on this journey for 25, 30 years now, and I'm still learning, I'm still growing. But that book challenged me to look at breakdowns differently. And so here's what I call the 5 steps or 5 stages to a breakthrough. Number 1 is the breakdown. Once again, raise your hand if you've experienced a breakdown. Do you think it's an accident that you're here today listening to this guy talking about overcoming your breakdown? No. Something told you to come here today to listen to this message. My hope is that your mind and your heart is open enough to realize that this isn't Michael Taylor talking to you. This is divine intelligence giving you a message. You guys open to that idea? You guys feel that in your gut right now? It's like, oh, shoots. God might be talking to me. Because sometimes the universe has to take drastic measures to get our attention. Sometimes it takes a cosmic 2x4 slap upside the head to get you to wake up. And so for me, my slap upside the head was my divorce. My divorce was literally the best thing that ever happened to me, as difficult and as painful as it was. Because for the first time, I had to stop looking out there. I had to start looking in here. And I have always been the guy that loves to read, and I have to get it up here, process it up here to figure things out. But I was so disconnected from my heart. And so the universe said, okay, you're pretty stubborn. I need you to change something. And that's when that journey began. So your breakdown, once again, is absolutely perfect, even when it hurts. And so I want to come back to the idea that there's but one presence and one power in the universe, and that power is love, and that's all it can do. So if you're in the middle of breakdown and it's painful, know the truth. Love is there. It's not doing it to you, but you have to be willing to accept that it's there. Okay? So that's the first stage of the breakthrough. So the first stage is breakdown. Second is awareness. Now again, I like to think of myself as somewhat of an intellectual in a way, but I used to stay stuck in my head. If I couldn't get it to fit in my head, I couldn't accept it. But I've learned to know that sometimes it's not about what you think, but how you feel. And the awareness of me being connected to something greater than myself allowed me to stop trying to process God from here and start processing God in here. So awareness is the key, because you can't change something you're not aware of. And so when you go on this journey and you hit that point where you have that breakdown, and then all of a sudden you're going to see things a little differently. Primarily, the first thing you got to be willing to do is to stop looking out there. And when we start processing everything from the heart, from the connection to source, that's when life changes. But you got to have the awareness. And so you guys come here on Sundays and you listen to Bill, and he shares insights and information. And what's he doing? He's expanding your awareness. Because the more aware you are, the more conscious you are, the more power you have. So that's step number 2. Step number 3, healing. This is the stage I think most people skip over. How many of you guys have heard the term spiritual bypassing? Spiritual bypassing is when you basically rationalize that this, whatever is happening, you're thinking instead of feeling, but you're rationalizing that God or source is doing things, and then you can kind of skip over the painful things, right? And here's a perfect example. So when I got involved with the New Age movement, okay, as a former atheist, I shifted to start believing there was something bigger than myself, and so I got involved with the New Age movement. New Age movement was perfect for my denial system. Because no matter what happened, I could say, well, God is good and everything is good. And I was in complete denial of my emotional being, if you will. And as mentioned, I had a pretty traumatic childhood, and I had not done that healing work. So when I got involved with the New Age movement, it just made sense to me that I could just rationalize that God was good and everything was good, and I didn't have to deal with the stuff. Well, there was some stuff that I needed to deal with. And one of the things that helped me tremendously was I did the work. You guys have heard of a guy named John Bradshaw? Yes. I did a 3-day workshop with John Bradshaw, Healing Your Inner Child. And what it did was, it allowed me to stop rationalizing in my head this spiritual idea of God is good, and it allowed me to feel the pain that I was carrying. Because as human beings, I believe we're energetic beings. And if we have unhealed trauma that we haven't healed and dealt with, it will sabotage our lives. And what we began doing, we began rationalizing. And what is rationalizing? Is just telling yourself rational lies. We rationalize things. So again, for me, I was rationalizing how spiritual I was, and it was a form of denial because I didn't want to deal with that emotional pain. But in that workshop, I allowed myself to feel that trauma as a child. And in feeling that trauma, I was able to release it and let it go. Now, I made an analogy once that as human beings, when we're born, we have this cosmic pipe that comes through the top of our skull, and energy kind of flows through this pipe. Okay? So that's our connection to source. When we experience pain and trauma, we get these little energy blocks. Okay? So imagine this cosmic pipe. Every time we get hurt, there's a negative energy block that fills in that pipe. Every time we get hurt. So when we get all this pain, and eventually that pipe literally gets clogged with negative energy. It isn't until we heal, allow ourselves to feel that negative energy, that we can let it go. When we do our healing work, it opens that pipe, and guess what? It gives us direct access to the divine. As long as that pipe is clogged with pain, you will process everything through your intellect. You can't connect to God through your intellect. You have to connect to God through feeling. So that healing process, for me, this has been my experience, is the most important thing I've ever done. So here's a good story. I was actually staying with a friend, and I didn't have a job. I didn't have a car. She allowed me to use a car and everything. And so one day she came home from work, and she asked me how my day went. I said, well, things are great. I went and looked for jobs, and God is good. And so she goes, Michael, no. She says, how are you doing? How are you feeling right now? And my response was, I'm great. God is good, right? She looked at me again. She says, Michael, cut the BS. I just want to know how you're feeling right now. I said, look, I just told you, everything's great. So this was the mask I used to wear. And she looked at me and she says, Michael, let me ask you this. How does it make you feel to have to depend on me and not have your own source of income? How does it feel to not be able to go see your kids because you don't have transportation? How does that make you feel? And I stopped for a moment and I thought about it. And I realized what I was doing. I was processing everything from that denial, spiritual bypassing perspective. And in that moment, I just surrendered. And I thought about my kids. And I realized how sad I had been by not being able to see my kids. I realized how I felt like a failure because I was depending on this friend because I didn't have a job. And I allowed myself to feel that sadness for just a moment. And all of a sudden, I just began to cry. And I was like, oh man, what am I going to do? And my friend, in all of her wisdom, she comes over to me and she hugs me. She says, Michael, I love you. You're my friend. I don't care what you do. I love you for who you are, but you're in denial. You need to get out of this new age BS and get real with the pain that you're carrying. And in that moment, I just surrendered and I just wept and I allowed myself to feel deeply in that moment. And most of all, what I felt was how much this friend loved me, which I had never really allowed myself to feel But this person just loved me for me. She didn't care if I was successful or not. She just loved me. And it was in that moment that's before I did the John Bradshaw workshop. But as a result of that conversation, I knew that I needed to do some emotional healing work. And so this stage, this is possibly the most important stage that you have to go through if you really want to have your breakthrough. It's about becoming free. It's about waking up to who you are. And if you've got that unresolved stuff, you'll never get there. And I have to share this story because after my divorce, I really struggled with relationships. And I noticed a pattern. My relationships would last 2 to 3 weeks, and then the women were all leaving. And they'd say the same thing. I care too much about you to stay in this relationship. Wait. Well, how is that possible? You care about me, but you're leaving? But then they would say this. The reason I'm leaving is because you're emotionally unavailable. Ouch. But that's what the healing is about. It's about becoming emotionally available. Not just in romantic relationships, but just in your interactions with people, just being authentically who you are. So, understand that as you go through this process from the breakdown to the breakthrough, healing is the key, I believe, to your true connection or connecting to Source. Number 4, after you heal, then you got to grow. So I don't think there's a destination, there's a journey. So if we do our inner work and we heal, then we have to commit to constant and never-ending improvement. I'm always asking myself, how can I be better? How can I go deeper? So how do I do that? I read a lot of books. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I'm committed to my own growth, spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, but it's really about growth. And so it's not like you're going to get there and go, ha, I'm here. No, once you get here, there's somewhere else to go. And that's what growth is about. It's about connecting deeper and deeper to who you are. Now, I don't like to see myself as some sort of spiritual guru. I don't have all the answers. But what I do know is every day I commit to gaining a deeper and deeper connection to my Source. And so for me, growth means I spend a lot of time in quiet contemplation, just connecting to God, divine intelligence, whatever you want to call it. And so understand that it's a process. You want to constantly grow. And last but not least is the breakthrough. But again, the breakthrough isn't the end. The breakthrough is the beginning. Once you go through your breakdown and you get to that point where you're breaking through, then the whole world opens up to you. It's just the beginning. So you have to commit to the process. So again, these are the 5 stages of breakdown to breakthrough, and that's how you get to breakthrough. So once you break through, now the magic begins. There's a new story, there's a new you, and a new future. So here's some of the benefits of going through the breakthrough. Number 1 is clarity. And I can't describe in words what that feels like when you have this clarity, this inner knowing that you are connected to something greater than yourself, and that something is moving through you as you. That's a powerful place to be when you have that level of clarity. And that clarity will bring an inner peace. And that inner peace allows you to know that no matter what breakdown you may go through, you have everything you need to overcome that breakdown. And that's a very comforting feeling. And then, if you go through your breakthrough and you find your purpose, I believe every single one of us has a unique and divine purpose. And the divine purpose, there's no bigger, better than, it's just yours. What is your purpose? Now, how do you find your purpose? Well, first of all, you got to figure out who you are. Then you got to figure out what your unique gifts and talents are. Because we all have unique gifts and talents. We're born with them, but it's our responsibility to wake up to them. And when you find your purpose, you realize that you are now in service to humanity by sharing your purpose. And when you find your purpose, you'll have this sense of confidence. Not cockiness, not arrogance, but just a confidence in knowing that, before I give a presentation, I say a little prayer, and it says, "Dear God, do your perfect work in me, through me, as me." That confidence comes from knowing that energy, that intelligence that's moving through me is simply expressing through me as me. Confidence. Amazing. And of course, you'll gain resilience. You're able to bounce back from and through breakdowns easier and faster. Because life happens. And as mentioned, there's not a destination where you just get there and go, I made it, and life just stops. No. But you have to build up the resilience to know that you can go through anything. And then you begin making an impact. You make an impact on other people's lives by sharing your gifts and talents. And then when you do that, you leave a legacy of impacting others and sharing who you really are with others. So it's not about what happened to you. It's about what's now possible because of it. So it's not what happens, it's what happens next that matters. So going back to what Shakespeare said, nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. So as you think about the breakdowns that you may have experienced or may be experiencing right now, are they good or are they bad? You get to choose. You get to choose. So, and I love this part. This does not deny that breakdowns can be painful. We have to understand that if it doesn't challenge us, it can't change us. And I believe, once again, the universe is perfect. And when we get challenged, it's simply life's way of building us up to do something amazing. Our greatest gift as human beings is the power to choose. You get to choose moment by moment who you're going to be and how you're going to respond. So I want to share a couple of my breakthroughs. And once again, this isn't bragging or boasting, but it's the truth. So I want you to think about the story that I shared. Young black kid in America with only an 11th grade education, no formal training, no silver spoon in my mouth, just a guy with an idea that one day he could become something great. And so just as I think about all the stuff that I went through, all the challenges, all the struggles, all the pain, to now be an author of more than 20 books, to have been featured on television, and to have a film. I created a documentary film. I have a program that I designed that helps youth recognize their brilliance early. Obviously speaking. I host 4 podcasts that I just love sharing my messages with others. And ultimately, what I know is that I'm fulfilling my divine purpose. I already know what I want to have on my tombstone. It's going to have my name, birth, and death, and at the bottom it's going to say, he did exactly what he came here to do. That's what's going to be on my tombstone. So, I want you to reframe breakdowns. And now, whenever you're in breakdown, I want you to think of them as a sacred knock. A sacred knock is simply the universe's way of getting your attention to let you know that it's time to grow. Wow. As a former atheist, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, who am I to be up here talking about God? It's kind of crazy, kind of. But now my heart is full. As God is saying, yeah, you listened, you trusted, and look at where you are now. That's amazing. That's an amazing feeling. So, awakening to divine intelligence. Once again, I choose to call God divine intelligence because, once again, I believe there's this divine intelligence that created and is still creating this amazing universe that we live in. If you pay attention to mainstream media, it's easy to conclude that the world is going to hell in a handbasket. What if humanity is simply in a breakdown period right now? What if all this stuff that we see, things like broken relationships, broken systems, our political climate, our racial climate, what if all of this is part of something bigger? What if we're not just living through history? What if we're being prepared to make history? I personally believe, this is my belief, that there has never been a better time to be alive on the planet than right now. At the same time, I don't deny all the challenges that are out there. Any of you know Wayne Dyer? Wayne Dyer, my favorite mentor of all time. And he taught me this simple lesson. He said, never focus your attention on that which is wrong. Always focus your attention on that which is right. So it's really an energetic transfer per se. So if I focus my attention on what's wrong, I'm going to see more of what's wrong. If I focus my attention on what's right, I'm going to experience more things that are right. And so as I look around the world and I see everything that's going on, I don't see a world that's falling apart. I see a world that's coming together. Now, there's a woman named Barbara Marx Hubbard. You may have heard of her. She wrote an amazing book called Conscious Evolution. And in her book, she theorizes that humanity is still evolving. We're evolving in consciousness. And she says that human beings are evolving to what she calls Homo universalis. So right now we're Homo sapiens, but she says we're evolving to Homo universalis. And I believe that. I believe as human beings we have this amazing ability and capacity to do some amazing things. And I believe people are waking up to that, even though you may not see it in mainstream media. As I look at my own life, I remember being raised in the 60s when obviously race was a really big issue per se, and I remember not understanding what the difference was. Because in the 60s, I remember segregated elementary schools. I remember in school, in elementary, we had race riots in elementary school. I remember when we would watch television, little black and white televisions, and when a black person was on TV, it was a huge event. People were calling each other saying, "Did you see Sidney Poitier on TV?" And so when I think about race relations, I see throughout the media so much racial division, but from my experience, I'm blown away at how far we've come as a country in my lifetime. I don't deny racism exists. I don't deny some internalized racism, if you will, but at the same time, my experience has taught me, has shown me, that we as a species are capable of loving each other, period. Regardless of what color we are. So my invitation for you is to, as you think about this process called breakdown, breakthrough, recognize that divine intelligence. Think about this. Now, if there's such a thing as divine intelligence, don't you think it would be intelligent enough to create a system that will not destroy itself? That just makes sense to me. I'm just saying. But this, I believe this intelligence knows exactly what it's doing. And on the surface, it might look like the world is going to hell in a handbasket, but it's not. Because if you look at the good book, in the beginning, it was good. And at the very end, it's good. So everything in the middle, it's just the process. So I believe the breakdown, breakthrough principle is how the universe operates, and this universal intelligence knows what it's doing, and ultimately, probably not in my lifetime, we will experience heaven right here on earth. Because that is the intention that divine intelligence had from the beginning. So, looking back, as I reflect over my life, my journey, as mentioned, I'm still in awe. Okay? I'm still in awe. But what I can now see, from me being a young black kid in America with the minimal resources I had, and yet to be doing what I'm doing now, I know it's not just me. There's something bigger moving through me. And so if I had to go back and do my life over again, I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't try to alleviate any of that pain. I would take it all again, because the pain is what created who I am today. And so perhaps your breakdown isn't the end of your story, and perhaps it's the beginning of the best chapter of your life. God bless you. Now, if you want to continue this conversation, I do have a new book out called Sacred Knocks, which kind of dives a little deeper into some of the concepts we talked about. Normally, I bring books to sell here, but due to some production issues, they weren't able to get them here on time. But if you're interested, you can scan the barcode on the left, gain access to the book, and you'll get the Bill Kerley $5 discount off the book. It's only $15. It's only $15. And if you'd like the copy of the slides from this presentation and you want to refer back to them, I saw a couple of people taking pictures. You can gain access to them by clicking the barcode or the QR code on the right. click it with your phone. It's going to ask you just a couple of questions about the presentation. I'd appreciate if you'd say, yeah, I liked it, no, I didn't like it, whatever. But you can actually gain the slides so that you can use them to refer back to if you want to continue your journey and your growth. All righty?